Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. Today's video is hopefully going to be a cozy one, a really comforting one, and will hopefully give you some new reads, or you'll find some solidarity here, because what I am doing in this video is I am talking about the books that you guys said are the best books that you have read this year. So this is a question that I asked on Instagram, and I got some really good responses. In some of these books, a few of these books I had not even heard of, and they immediately went on to my TBR. That's how amazing that they sounded. So let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so the first book that I want to talk about is Love Practically. So this is a book that I actually read last year. This was submitted by someone as their favorite book of the year so far, and I loved this book so much that I immediately put this author on the top of my list of favorite new authors for the year. So this is a romance that is a historical romance. It's a marriage of convenience, and essentially she has very strong feelings for him, like feelings of attraction and desire. She just like wants him so much, and what she feels like is actually love for him, but obviously she doesn't know him. They had a chance meeting in her younger years when she was having a season, and from that moment on she has kind of pined for him for a really long time. And this book, I love that it is on here because it features something that I think is pretty unpopular in romance books, and that is when the heroine is the one who's doing a lot of pining. Like, that can be a really hard thing for a lot of readers to get on board with. Like, we love it when our heroes pine, but it's not exactly fun to read a romance when the heroine is pining after the hero and he's either A, an idiot, B, oblivious, or C, with somebody else, right? Like, I don't love that exactly. So the fact that this is also one of my favorite books says a lot about how the author handled that. Now, the hero, for his part, he has a child that he's basically adopted, and the reason that he enters into this marriage with our heroine is because he needs a mother figure for this child. And so the most of the time of this book is spent with them trying to work on living together, and he has a lot of pretty severe things in his past that he's trying to overcome and work through, and one of them is alcohol use or alcohol abuse. And I just absolutely loved watching these two fall in love and watching them overcome their differences and watching them really try to make things work, and not only just to make things work, but to fall in love with each other, or to have a chance to fall in love because they were in this arranged marriage situation. So this to me felt like a very fresh take on that, and it just felt so real and just pure, and I loved the character transformation in here. So I'm not gonna gush about every single book on here, but this is one that I feel like needs way more hype. I've read a lot of this author's books. Some of her books are definitely gonna show up on my best books of the year video at the end of the year, but this is one that I actually read last year, and I'm so thrilled to see that someone else said it was their favorite. Okay, so now this next one is one that is, one of them is also a favorite book of mine, and the other one is very high on my priority list because of the person who suggested it, and it is, they said it's a tie between Drinker of Ink and The Goblin Emperor. I can't choose. So The Goblin Emperor is an adult fantasy book that is one of my favorite adult fantasy books. It is so deeply character driven, and the amount of depth that this character has as he's navigating this circumstance he has of being thrown into basically being the king when he's the only survivor of the emperor at the time, who was then killed, and he is half elf and half goblin. And so he has no concept of what the court is going to be like, and so he finds himself there, and the way that he has to just navigate the court politics and how he has to deal with people who are kind of like sucking up to him and others trying to figure out who is genuine and who is not, all while trying to figure out where he belongs. It was just so beautiful, and I loved it. I loved this book a lot, so I'm very thrilled to see that this is on favorites of the year as well. Drinker of Ink it looks like it is a contemporary romance, but how do we do this? Because it's set in like 1991, so I don't want to call that a historical romance. So it's set in 1991, this romance, and it's essentially about our heroine whose mother has been dealing with cancer and it has just come back. It has had a resurgence, and so she's got a lot of uncertainty in her life and a lot of fear and just some kind of dark feelings, and she's a university student. She's not really sure if she should be across the country or not, and so she ends up meeting a professor, essentially, who has family in Croatia, and they start having this deep, deep connection, the two of them. And it's the romance between the two of them, also while navigating, like, he has a brother that is back in Croatia in the war that he's very worried about, and then her worrying about her mother. And, you know, the thing that I think is also really beautiful about this is the heroine basically has dreams, hopes of romantic lives and things that are just really beautiful, and so she journals them because she's sure it's never going to happen in her own life. And then she finds herself in a situation with this professor where she's falling in love, she's experiencing all of these things, and she's realizing that, hey, actually, maybe I am living these dreams that I wanted to. So I am so excited about this one. As soon as, this is Erin from She Is Too Fond of Books on Instagram. As soon as I saw her talk about this, I think she actually even messaged me about it. I immediately bought it. And I have to get to it because it sounds amazing. So, okay, so now this next one is one that is also a favorite of mine. It has been a favorite for many years, and it is Six of Crows. I love and adore this book, this series, this duology so much. It is foundational to my love of fiction, and it is definitely one of my all-time favorite books ever. It is a YA fantasy centered around a heist, very character-driven, excellent characters, just... This is YA, but it doesn't feel like YA, so if you think you don't like YA and you still haven't read the series, I would just encourage you to pick it up because it is fantastic. The characters are very well developed, the plot is very interesting, and the fantasy world in here is pretty incredible as well. So, the other one she said is The Murder of Mr. Wickham by Claudia Gray. Now, I had not heard of this, but I was interested because I saw the author's last name and I'm like, it like sparked a memory. And then I realized that she is the one who wrote some vampire YA books that I read many, many years ago called Evernight. So I'm glad to see she's still writing. This book sounds amazing. And it is, you guessed it, about Mr. Wickham from Pride and Prejudice and the murder mystery surrounding his death. So this is one of the books that I added on to my want to read very much because I think it sounds amazing and I hadn't heard of this, so. Okay, so now the next one says, it's tough to pick only one, but if I had to, it would be Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. Abby Jimenez is one of my favorite authors. I love every single thing of hers that I have read. I think she is so fantastic. I love how real and full of depth her romances are, and obviously I'm not alone. Like, she's a very popular author. I really loved this book this year, and I'm so happy. I think we're going to see this for sure on a lot of people's best of the years, and I'm positive it's going to make it onto the Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Romance, too. The next one is the Frozen Fate trilogy by Pam Godwin. This one, I love Pam Godwin. She is one of 2 or 3 dark romance authors that I trust to tell dark romance in a way that I like. She always packs her stories with some crazy dark elements that don't feel like they're just thrown in there for shock value. That feels very integral to the character, to the story. Like when we did an interview with her on Jen's channel, it felt so obvious to me because the author said that she's a huge fan of horror books, and she really does add that element to her dark romances so they feel horrifying in that way. And this is her new series. It just came out this year, I believe. It's a trilogy, and I think that this is... Actually, I don't know what else I want to say about it because I'm not entirely sure what I was going to say, if it's true or not, and it also could be a spoiler. So, dark romance, I've heard this one is full of twists, and it is a hard read at times, but I've also seen this on a lot of people's favorites of the year. Okay, so now this next one is another book that I absolutely added to my want to read list. It sounds amazing. It sounds amazing. It's The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley. I'm not sure if you say Kellyanne or how you say that, but this is another book I desperately want to read, and I had not heard of this book at all. So it looks like this is a little bit science fiction and a little bit romance. I'm not entirely sure if it is straight romance, if it has a happily ever after or not, but I know there is a big, strong romantic subplot in here. And this one sounds so interesting because it appears to be in like a futuristic setting, and our heroine is working with our hero. They're trying to decide if space travel or time travel is something that actually could happen, and they fall in love along the way. And I'm making it sound more simplistic than the blurb actually sounded like. The blurb made it sound like this is full of a lot of depth and nuance, and I love things like that so much. So this is one that I really, really want to get to, like, as soon as possible. I think this one sounds absolutely amazing. Okay, so now this next one says, not counting sequels or rereads, I'd say Moon Called. That's the Patricia Briggs, which I have also read, and I really enjoyed that one. I love urban fantasy, and this one I think is fantastic. It's a little bit It's an older series, but it is still like so incredible. I need to continue on with this because I think I only read the first one. Did I read the second one? I don't even know. So I probably need to even go back and reread the first one because it's been a while. But that's a great one for sure. The next one is Assistant to the Villain was really good. So this is one that I feel like is a little bit polarizing, but I have heard equal things. Like some people really love this. They say it's just so fun. It's so engaging. And some people are just sort of like, it was fine. It was okay, you know? And then there are, of course, people who hate it. And that goes for any book, right? Any book that is on this list, you're going to probably find people who love it, think it's okay, or hate it. That's just the nature of books, right? So I love to see that this was on here because I heard from a friend on TikTok that this book is just really fun and they liked it a lot. So okay, the next one is Things We Left Behind by Lucy Score. Lucy Score is definitely a much-loved contemporary romance author. People really love her books. I have only read one of her books, and for me, I didn't really enjoy it, but I want to give her another try. I have other books of hers that I want to read, and I mean, a lot of people love her, so I'm so happy to see that this was on your best list of best books for the year. Okay, so now this next one. This next one is also one that I know. This is, man, this book. I'm actually currently reading this right now, and I could see that there's a chance this could top what is currently my favorite book of the year, which I'm not going to say in this video. I'm sorry. You're going to have to wait for my end of the year content to know what my favorite book of the year is, but you could probably guess. So this book is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is essentially about a girl who feels very trapped in her life and very confined. She wants to have freedom to live her own life in a time period which was, I think it's maybe the 1700s, so it's fantasy, time travel type of fantasy, and she has zero freedom. She's about to be in an arranged marriage and she doesn't want to do that, so in a moment of basically helplessness, she runs out and trying to find someone, some god or otherworldly being to make a deal with. And one of the laws that her family, I think it was her grandmother, said is never make a deal with a demon after dark. And she unknowingly does so, and the deal is basically that she will get to live forever, but no one will remember her, or no one will remember her name once she leaves their presence. And the rest of the book is her kind of grappling with that, and of course her having some relationship with the demon of some type. So I am such a huge fan of V.E. Schwab, and I'm only about a third of the way into this book, but I am 100% riveted and hooked to the concept, to the beautiful writing, to the emotional power that's in this book, and I will be shocked if this is not on my top 10 books of the year. I really will be. But I will probably be doing a top 10 fantasy and then a top 10 romance, just because that feels fair. That feels more fair, you know. Okay, so now the next one is Redeeming Six. So this is a contemporary romance that I feel like, I don't know where in the series this fits in, but I have heard a lot of people really love this series, like deeply, deeply, deeply love it. I've heard it's very emotional. I've heard that it is very moving, very powerful, very just, I've heard great things about this series. So it doesn't surprise me to see that this is on somebody's best books of the year. So now this next one is Wrong Heart by Jennifer Hartman. This is a Jennifer Hartman book that I have heard so much about, and I actually own this book, but I have not read it yet, and I deeply, deeply want to get back to it. I actually had forgotten about it for a while until I saw somebody comment on here about that. This is, I believe, it is about our hero has a heart transplant, and it is with our heroine's dead husband's heart, and that's the romance there. So it sounds like it's beautiful and emotional and heartbreaking in all of the best ways. And then the other book is Quiet Beautiful Things by Samantha Christie. So this is another contemporary romance that I have heard wonderful things about. I've heard this is so beautiful and very romantic, and just, I've heard nothing but praise about this book. So this is definitely also on my TBR as well, a book that I definitely want to get to. Not sure I'll get to it by the end of the year, but it is one that I've got my eye on. Okay, and then the next one is Spark of the Everflame. So this is a fantasy romance series that I really enjoy. I think it is very fun. I think it's very fast-paced. I really like the characters. I like the world. I like the romance. I think it's a solid fantasy romance. If you haven't read this yet and you're looking for a new series to get into, I would recommend this one. Okay, so now this next one is a little bit surprising because I never really hear about this author too much anymore. So this one is Origin in Death by J.D. Robb, which is the pen name for Nora Roberts in her, I think this is, I don't know if you would even actually call it romantic suspense, thriller mysteries. I know romance is obviously going to play a part in there, but they're basically long-running series. It's not like a book of each one that has a romance. I believe this is the type where the romance kind of continues on throughout the series. And I also will say that romance isn't going to be the first and foremost in this series for sure. So I love Nora Roberts. I haven't read her in so long. I have been meaning to for years to get back to her and read her, and I still haven't. She was one of the foundational romance authors that I found when I was a teenager and just loved and ate her books up. So I was thrilled to see that her J.D. Robb series was on here as well. Vicious Bonds. So this one is a dark fantasy romance by Shanora Williams, and this one sounds very interesting. It appears to just kind of start with a dark romance vibes, but then we also, in the blurb, it also says that they can hear each other's thoughts. So I think this one sounds interesting and very intriguing, and I am very happy that this is best book of the year for you. Another one is Blood and Steel, which is a fantasy romance, which I also read, and I really enjoyed this one. I want to continue on with this series so much. I think this is a really good fantasy romance series as well. When the Moon Hatched. So like I was saying earlier, there are going to be books on here that are polarizing, that people either love, they hate, or they feel meh about, right? And this one I think is especially polarizing. It is definitely one of my favorite books of the year. I love this book very much. It is not without flaw, so I understand when people don't. But for me, I don't know if it was a circumstance of right time, right book, or whatever it was, but I absolutely loved it, and it's a favorite book of mine for the year for sure. Okay, so now this next one is one that I have also read, and it is The Children of Gods and Fighting Men. So this one is an adult fantasy, and this is an interesting one because it's a historical fantasy in Irish mythology, Celtic mythology, and we have two women in two different time periods who are also able to communicate. If you want a fantasy book that has a hefty dose of female rage, this is the book for you. I would say this leans more on the historical fiction with light fantasy elements, but it's solidly written, great characters, very interesting plot, and it's a great time for sure. Okay, so now this next one is also one of my all-time favorite books. I haven't ever even talked about it on this channel, I feel like, because I read it long before I started this channel, but I love seeing a resurgence of popularity for this book, and it is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. V.E. Schwab, as you know, as I've talked about a lot, she's one of my favorite authors. This book is fantastic. It is a dark fantasy, I would call this book dark academia even, with two college students who essentially end up figuring out how to create superpowers within themselves, and then they end up as rivals. So this book is pretty dark. This has great characters, it has a great concept, and it is just absolutely engaging from the first page to the last page. One of my all-time favorite books. I adore this one. My husband loves it as well. Now the next book on here is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. I am not at all surprised to see this book on here. I think in the whole Stormlight archive, this one is a huge fan favorite. People absolutely love this book, and while I absolutely loved it too, my favorite still remains The Way of Kings. That's my favorite book in the series so far. I still haven't read Rhythm of War, but I love seeing a Stormlight archive book on here. Okay, so now the next one is Firebird Chronicles by T.A. White, the entire series. I looked this one up because I hadn't heard of this, and this looks very fun. This one looks like it is a sci-fi romance about aliens, spaceships, and things like that, and a war that is brewing. So this one looks very fun. It looks like it would be a good time. Okay, so now the next one is Voyager by Diana Gabaldon. I have not read this series. One day I want to get to Outlander to read it, but I don't know when that will be. But one day I would like to. So now this next book is another one of those books that I read the blurb, had never heard of this book before, and immediately added it to my want to read list on Goodreads, and it is A Dark and Secret Magic by Wallace Kinney. The blurb on this book, you guys, the blurb on this book is really what sold me. So this basically says a warm, spellbinding tale about a witch and the secrets her coven has been keeping from her, with echoes of the classic Hades and Persephone story in the tradition of practical magic and Witch of Wild Things. This says it is a celebration of the Halloween season and a love letter to anyone who drinks pumpkin spice in August and carries the spirit of a witch inside their hearts all year long. So I'm kind of sad that I didn't hear about this book until just now, because obviously for myself, I've moved straight into Christmas time, Christmas season, you know, like I'm here for the holiday happiness. I'm here for the Christmas season. I'm ready to put Halloween away, sadly, but to be fair, I kind of started doing that in August with the pumpkin spice and the Halloween season. So now it's time for Christmas, right? But I am very intrigued with this. I think it sounds amazing, and I can't wait to read it next year for sure. Now this next one is Where We Started and Where We Promised by Ashley Munoz? I apologize for not pronouncing that name correctly. I know I didn't. This is, I believe these are motorcycle romances, and I remember hearing about the first book. Everybody was raving about it. I immediately bought the Kindle version, and I have it sitting on my Kindle. It's one of those books that I want to get to one day, but kind of has gotten to the back of my mind. Contemporary romance, motorcycle romance. I've heard it's emotional. I really want to read this one, so I'm glad that it made it onto somebody's favorites. Okay, the next one is Glow of the Everflame, which is fantastic. This is a continuation of the Spark of the Everflame, Kindred's Curse saga. Really enjoy this fantasy romance series. Happy to see it on here. And this one is another one for Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. Love to see it. We love that one. And also Funny Story by Emily Henry. So this actually is a book I have been meaning to read all year long, and I just haven't. I have planned, if all goes well, to do an Emily Henry reading vlog because there are a lot of her books that I haven't read. The only book of hers that I've ever read is Beach Read. So this is one I definitely want to include on there along with some others. And I've heard nothing but rave reviews about this book, honestly. I feel like this is one that people universally agree is one of her best. So I'm excited about that one for sure. Okay, just two more. One is Butcher and Blackbird. I feel like this one I've heard really good things about too. It sounds like it's a lot of fun, even though it's a dark serial killer romance. But I've heard the romance is sweet. It's the elements outside of it that are dark, murdery, serial killery. Sounds like everybody who's read this has really enjoyed it, so that's fun. And then the last book is one of my own personal favorites that I read last year, and it is The Right Move by Liz Tomforty. This book is one of the most romantic books that I have ever read in my life, and I love it so freaking much. So, sports romance, basketball, she's just come out of her boyfriend cheated on her, she ends up moving in with her best friend's brother who is an NBA star, and they fall in love. It's beautiful. So, all right, my friends, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you would like to have more bonus content from me, I do have a Patreon. You can join at the link down below. I have a 7-day free trial. And also, if you have made it this far, I would love it if you could leave me an emoji to let me know you are here. And please feel free to leave any type of Christmas emoji, even though it's November, because I got my Christmas mug. And thank you all for being here. Let me know what your favorite book of the year is down below. I would love to hear that, and I'll see you all in my next video.